one thing that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed did in creating the Prosperity Party is he wisely made it a non-ethnic based party. Therefore, it's not based on any one ethnic group or region. And this is very positive, that people have to come together under one conception of Ethiopia. Not, this is my area, I don't care about the rest, we don't need the government and all this, etc. All that kind of nonsense, which is dangerous nonsense, has to end. And that we have to instill a spirit in the people in Ethiopia that the national development of their nation is in their interest, and the development of each person and each state is in the interest of the other. Democracy is a very ambiguous term for me. It does not mean elections every 4 years. That we can do, or 5 years. The notion that our founding fathers had in the United States of America was a republic where you had an educated group of people who debated policy and discussed it from the highest level. And it depended on an educated population. A republic is not pure democracy. A republic is you work with and nominate and select the most educated and thoughtful people. And democracy in itself is not a solution. Without economic development, there will never be democracy. Without economic development, you will never see an end to poverty. Economic development, growth in energy, industry, manufacturing, rail transportation, potable water. This is a fundamental human right, which the advocates of so-called democracy never discuss. They never bring it up. They're unconcerned about it. How many Ethiopians and Africans die per day for lack of clean water, for lack of electricity, for waterborne diseases, which are a lack of infrastructure? Why don't those issues get brought up? Why isn't that a concern of President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken and the US Senate and the US Congress? They never bring these issues up. They're concerned, so-called, about the dying and suffering in Tigray, which is legitimate, but they ignore everything else that goes on. So democracy in itself is not the solution. Democracy is part of a process that has to be focused on developing and nurturing the powers of each individual to develop their mind. That requires a house. That requires a decent standard of living. That requires electricity. That requires discussion. Do people have the leisure time to sit back and have a discussion about the policy of the future of Ethiopia? No, not if they're searching for food, water, a job, or to stay alive. So democracy is unfortunately been misused over the last 50 years by the West. My standard is much higher than that. And that's what I would hope Ethiopia will carry out in their discussions over the future in a national dialogue across the country.
Thank God, we must appreciate that for the first time in the modern history of Ethiopia, we have had a free, fair, verifiable and transparent election in Ethiopia. The security was there and there was no pressure whatsoever from the machinery of the state to influence the voting of the people in one direction or the other. So you could say that this is the first serious election, that credible election that has taken place in the history of modern Ethiopia.
Ethiopian country is one of the best examples in Africa of what a government has to do, which means an industrial development policy. So I think that's why the last 3 years, Ethiopia has been attacked by the geopolitician, by the Western institution, because of this development and industrial policy. So what we can hope with this new government is to go on and to pursue this policy of development. I think Ethiopia has a very strong history, of course, as a non-colonized country. and decide, a few years ago to launch a real development policy. So the destabilization going on has to be stopped. And I think the new Ethiopian government have to continue to work, particularly with this industrial policy, with the Great Dam, Renaissance Dam, with the industrial park development, railroad policy, and so on and so forth. I mean, we have to don't take too much attention to the geopolitical attacks on the country, but to go on the policy of industrialization, because Ethiopia has become one of the best examples in this policy for all the African continent.
The fact that you have a new government coming in, I believe, that would give the new government an opportunity to redefine the conflict in Tigray. Obviously, the government is not going to negotiate with the TPLF. However, I think it would be useful to seek out other groups or associations that represent the people in Tigray to have negotiations, not with the leaders of the TPLF who launched the insurrection in November, but with others who are representative of the Tigrayan people in that region, and to find ways in recognizing other groups to have discussions that could lead to beginning of a ceasefire and the beginning of restoring the standard of living and the health of the people of Tigray. And when you change governments, you have the opportunity to bring in new elements and to redefine the conflict as it has been up to this point. And my hope would be that the government would look possibly down that avenue of finding groups and associations to discuss ceasefire with in the Tigray region.
As it is today, I have talked to people in many places. It is expected the Prosperity Party to win with a landslide majority. What happens now is that Prosperity Party will have the requisite majority, actually what you would call a very big majority in the parliament and in all other elective structures in Ethiopia. Dr. Abiy will, for the first time, be in a position to have the free hand to appoint his cabinet from among the ranks of people who have got the mandate and the legitimacy of their own electorate. Under the circumstances, it is very important, in my opinion, that they bring in all the different shades of the Ethiopian society into the new system. They have to bring in both the wisdom of age, people who have had an experience. The youth also have to be in, the technocrats or intellectuals who are schooled in the statecraft, and at the same time, political dreamers who are going to chart the way forward for a new Ethiopia. And I presume Dr. Abiy is one person who combines a lot of qualities in as far as championing, in as far as guiding and leading the future of this great country to the next technological, economic, and social level of development.
I expect Ethiopia to stay Ethiopia. Ethiopia, as I said, is a very old country, is a very important country in Africa. It has always resisted against neo-imperial colonialism, imperial policy, and has always, fight against this policy. So I urge the new government to go on and to stay Ethiopia with the Ethiopian people, which is a great civilization, to fight against this imperial policy and go on this development, industrial development. And I think what is the best, I think in the next future is to share, with the neighbors, African neighbors, this policy of development. We know that there is already some project, for example, in a space cooperation, We know that Ethiopia wants to also extend its railroad policy to the neighboring country. We know that with the Great Dam, Renaissance Dam, Ethiopia wants to share its electricity, its power. So I think Ethiopia is the center, the epicenter of the development of the whole continent. And we know in several countries, I was in Ivory Coast, I was in Mali recently, and everybody is looking at Ethiopia. Everybody wants to have the same policy, which is to have electricity, to have a railroad, high-speed train, to have space policy, development, satellites. So Ethiopia is now an example for all the African continent. All the other countries are looking at Ethiopia, and I hope that the new government, and I'm sure that the new government will go on this policy and be we can say, stars in the sky to enlighten the continent as a whole.
I'm very, very happy to say that for the first time, Ethiopia truly had a democratic election. And that by itself is a great significant achievement. And I think everyone coalesced and supported the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed because they understand that Ethiopia is being attacked by the Western media, by the Western government. So truly democratically election. That is a great achievement.
I would like to see the end of the language of the global war on terror. I know that the Ethiopian army has collaborated with the US military there in the global war on terror, but this is something that Americans are tired of. We just ended this war in Afghanistan. Cost more trillions of dollars than anyone's able to count. It depends on who you ask. Brown University came out with a study some months back in which they said that the global war on terror has created 37 million refugees. They estimated it had killed 800,000 people. I think that's an underestimate. And they said $6.2 trillion. That's just one estimate of how many trillions. And I think something else that some people are realizing is that the war in Afghanistan, for instance, was not a war to defend Americans. It was fundamentally a way of laundering money from US and European taxpayers into the hands of military contractors and a transnational security elite. And I think Americans are tired of this. And so I don't think an appeal to partnership in the war on terror is a winning argument. I mean, it might be to the oligarchs. I don't know, but they're so shifting away from that to this humanitarian intervention argument that they've been using in Ethiopia.
I think the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has done significant amount of work within just 3 years. We have seen all this development across the country, economic development, a lot of social, cultural developments, initiatives for the youth, initiative for women. It's extremely impressive. I mean, you can tell that TPLF for 27 years or so stole all that money, took it to foreign banks, but every little thing we got here is invested. The Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed should be congratulated for that. Why is that? Because it's a sign, a telltale of things to come. In the near future, when the government is in power, I predict that they're going to continue the work that they've started, which is basically economic development, which is a primary importance, because when you look at Ethiopia, we have suffered through the war. We have a large amount of youth. For example, the young people represent the majority. 41% is under the age 15, and then 28% is between the age 15 to 29. It's the same thing with the unemployment is staggering high. So what do we need to do? We need to actually develop the country economically. We can use the models to the Horn of Africa, for example. The Horn of Africa initiative is exciting. all these countries that are gathered around the Horn, including Sudan. By the way, Sudan should be educated to the benefit of working with Ethiopia for economic development and also benefiting from the GERD itself. So when you think about it, the most important thing that I see in the near future that should be adopted is the acceleration of economic growth, and also to use that economic growth to improve social progress, justice, and cultural development side by side. And so what will that do? When there is economic development, it really promotes regional peace and stability in the Horn. And it will have a positive cascading effect.
I want to say that I'm embarrassed, as I'm often embarrassed by my own government. I'm embarrassed that there were all kinds of news articles about Biden and his sanctions, but no one published Abiy Ahmed's response. The one thing, I thought it was an impressive response. The one thing, again, that I didn't like about it was the framing about the global war on terror. I think that needs to be left behind. But I'm very impressed with the way that Ethiopia has stood up to the United States. Same way I was impressed in 2015 when Burundi did the same. And then Burundi, as part of that resistance, managed to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. These International Criminal Court prosecutions are often a form of hybrid warfare like the sanctions. I wrote a piece for Black Agenda Report about the sanctions last week. And this week I wrote about the ridiculous story of the disappearing 428 World Food Program trucks. That's one of the silliest stories I've heard in a long time. What can I'm not sure what I could tell you about how to defend your independence. I have the impression that the idea of creating an Ethiopian citizenship as opposed to ethnic identity or ethnic identity that is stronger than citizenship. I get the idea that that's what you need to strive for. And I certainly, and probably that's what you need to stay together. And I think there's every reason for Ethiopia to stay together. And I'm going to repeat something that I said when I was on before, which is that a united Ethiopia can negotiate from strength with the world's industrial powers about things like labor protections. I understand that you have a large competitive labor force. So being able to protect your labor force is one thing that I would think a strong central government could do. Also negotiations about trade and tariffs, or agreements about resource extraction. One thing I heard recently in some sort of a podcast with Elias Amari, he's an Eritrean intellectual who lives here. And he said that Eritrea had a deal with a Canadian gold mining corporation that was 60-40. And for an African resource extraction agreement, that's really good. I mean, I studied the ExxonMobil oil extraction agreement with Chad, and it was highway robbery. So if you have a united Ethiopia, you're much better able to negotiate contracts like that.
The challenges that you just described are real. We, as a diaspora organization here, I participate with Ethiopian American Civic Council, with the Ethiopian Global Youth Groups, and what have you. And we work alongside with different diaspora organizations, and all of us are puzzled, like you mentioned. The accomplishment of the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed currently is extremely significant. The filling of the GERD, as you said, and the democratic election. Why isn't the West broadcasting that, looking at that? I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of theories, and I think I believe I discussed this once with you before, is the Horn of Africa seems to be a very interesting spot right now for the US. If you look at United States, Biden's administration, even his internal administration is focused on deterring China. So everything pretty much his administration does is deter China. Now, China is exerting a little bit of an influence in the UN, as you've seen it. So is Russia. So where does that leave United States of America and the Horn? So, before there was the Soviet Union, the United States, we eliminated the two superpowers. Now there's only one superpower, but China and Russia are encroaching in that single superpower. So America wants to exert influence in that part of the world, Horn of Africa being very important. The second thing that I see why our accomplishment has not echoed throughout the world when it should is that Egypt is against the GERD. And it looks like most of the Western world side with Egypt. I know it's simple when I say that. I'm not trying to simplify this rather complex issue, but there is no other explanation that CNN, the most reputable news agency that we all subscribe to for the last 20 years living as a diaspora, would go out and with unsubstantiated evidence would call out genocide. That is the most ridiculous thing that I have ever seen or heard from any reputable news organization. So what do you see? You see the United States is really using the news channels as a propaganda. You would expect this from a dictatorship. Maybe other dictatorship countries would do this. The diaspora never expected this would happen in America. And this is the reality. So that means there are other forces behind it that are pushing this agenda. And I think the two that I mentioned are the most significant ones in my view.
I have never had any respect for CNN or the rest of the oligarchy's media outlets. I've seen what they've said about other countries that the US wants to interfere with, invade, sanction, etc. Countries like Venezuela, and I mentioned Burundi, many others, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. CNN's not any better about those than it is about Ethiopia. So I don't have any expectations of CNN or most of the rest of the corporate press, although we did hear from someone, Asqual and I were on a web conference where someone explained how they were working with the corporate press to try to reduce the bias. And it seemed like they were doing effective work. Right. But, I think it's a losing game to expect anything from CNN.
Right. She's talking about the lobbying and the PR firm that we have hired with the Ethiopian American Civic Councils doing effective work. And so the Associated Press release that we did, it reached 180 million people. And then also on Yahoo News. So that's significant that we've been trying to do for the last 2 months. I do remember the Derg regime. It was a bloodbath. There was something called the Red Terror. A lot of the younger generation perhaps do not know that. But the systematic killing of people in the what we call, brain flight, capital flight, and those of us that could survive, although we were children at that time, we left the country. So what happened? Ethiopia lost its youth, and it's such a significant loss. So when you think about it, for half a century, 50 years, Ethiopia has been suffering. It's suffering because people are killed, murdered, left the country. And then after that, during the TPLF, there's ethnic federalism and there's genocide in different parts of the country. And then there's also embezzlement. I mean, they literally stole over $30 billion, $40 billion and made us poor and destitute. So here we are. The new government, I think, is focused on, first and foremost, democracy. The new government, from what I've seen, the deliverables, not just what they say, but they deliver equality for women. They concentrate mainly on the youth so that we can drive economic development alongside with democracy. They tend to focus on things that unite us than the things that divide us. Democracy, when it is coupled with economic development, brings about peace, stability. It's like your neighbor. You live with your neighbor, you work together, you share whatever you have, and then maybe you do business together. But if you fight, you kill each other's children. And that's going to be, something that they think about for generations to come. So we have to stop that, go into, democracy is there, equality is there, get rid of ethnic federalism and develop the economy. I mean, we have, like I said, almost 70% of the youth needs to have a job. So we need to advance economic development so that people are economically independent. When individuals or communities are economically independent, they will actually do not want to fight. They want to protect their investment. They don't want to fight. They want to cooperate. The next thing that we need to do is empower women. Why? Because when you look at women, especially even when you do like domestic industry type results, shows that overwhelmingly 60 to 70% of the women come back to reinvest that into their own children, their neighbors, into their communities, into their families. So we need more economic policies that will empower women and the youth. So I think democracy, the way we see it, is great. With economic development would be the best result in my view.
I think democracy is most effective when people are organized at a grassroots level, not just when they vote for a head of state, when you have a strong civil society where workers and students, any other groups that have a stake to assert or defend are organized at the grassroots level. With regard, I want to say something with regard to the ethnic identities and conflicts that you need to overcome with a sense of citizenship. Some people have told me that I should spend more time trying to understand or be concerned about this. And my feeling has been, this is for Ethiopians to settle. I know that, like the United States, you're still living with the consequences of empire and oppressed peoples. And I hope that you can work all that out to build an Ethiopian citizenship and stay together.
Economic development alongside with the cultural development is that Ethiopians, both in Christian and Muslim tradition, are very religious people. And so one thing that the Western education did to us is just take that consciousness away from us. So we need to go back to our roots and get that cultural, the way we look at it, the way we, yes, cultural virtues back into society. Well, I congratulate the new government, and I do believe that they are in the right track. And we all in the diaspora here in the US will do whatever we can to support it. We love our motherland and wish them to pray and be cognizant that God, the God of Abraham and Isaac in both religions, Muslim and Christian, looks down to Ethiopia with mercy. And may the Lord anoint the leaders with oil, like the Bible says, and we all end the fighting and be one as a country, a nation.
I want to wish the new government and the Ethiopian people all the best. And just once again, I think you need to talk about the security and integrity of Ethiopia, but it would be better if you leave the rhetoric of the global war on terror behind.
I congratulate, first and foremost, the Prosperity Party and the leadership of the Prosperity Party, beginning with the Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy. And I also congratulate all the people who were elected into the two houses in Ethiopia, as well as elected also into the regional assemblies and the regional governments. I just saw my friend Shimelis Abdissa has also been elected as the president of Oromia region. I'm hoping that many very progressive young men and women will be in the governments, both at the regional level as well as the federal level. So my congratulations to them all. We are waiting for Ethiopia to lead the way, for the rebirth of a new Horn of Africa and the integration of the Horn of Africa, the development of the resources of those countries for the benefits of the people of the Horn of Africa, and the peace in the region. I mean, we never had peace for a very long time. So the new leadership has got to take peace as a centerpiece of its own policies and the future of this big country that is very critical to the development of the Horn of Africa and the prosperity of Horn of Africa.
Congratulations again. The election went peacefully, and now we have a new elected government in Ethiopia. I think I want to say again, congratulations for Abiy Ahmed for leading this process, and also congratulations for the Prosperity Party, because the party that stopped the ethnic federalism, and now this is the time and the era to go to the world with no ethnic groups as political parties. You need one party for Ethiopia. You need prosperity.
From the past regime, the country has battled and has gone through a lot of problems. This new government, I'm not saying they're perfect, but they are doing their best for that country. They have put that country together. They have saved that country from 120 million refugees, from flooding European countries, Middle Eastern countries, the world nations. So this new government has saved human beings, a country. Now they've got a lot of job to do, especially the TPLF, the previous regime, has made up a lot of mess within that country, economical, political, a lot of reform. So what would expect from this new government will be a lot of hard work, stabilities, and then equalizations within those who live within the Ethiopians, as also diplomatic engagement within the Africans, as well as also European countries. This is what is expected from them.